Hi everybody, it's Jackie with Jackie's Wreaths and Things, and today I'm going to show you how to make this adorable cute little snowman. We're going to start by making the hat. You will need templates in order to do this. You can find these online, and what I did was I found this template online. And then I took a program and I blew it up to accommodate the size that I wanted. What you're going to do next is you're going to make permanent templates, and you're going to do that using poster board. So you're going to trace these onto the poster board. And then once you cut them out, you will have your permanent templates for your snowman. So in order to make the snowman, now what you're going to need to do, that you have your templates, is you're going to need to prepare your fabric. So to make this easy as possible, what I did was I took foam. And this is your crafter's foam that you can find at Walmart. You can order it online. I ironed my fabric out first. And I recommend that you use a white foam as a backing so that the color won't show through, especially if you're using a white fabric. And what you're going to do is you're just going to take some basic Elmer's glue. And you're going to do this very lightly, because if you use too much glue, you'll saturate the fabric, and you don't want to saturate the fabric, but you do want to get the fabric stuck to the foam. So I do this in half stages, and that's why I peeled back half the fabric, so I don't overwhelm the sheet, and it's just easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my glue, and I'm just going to go back and forth. Spread it down, and then I'm going to take a sponge brush to evenly spread this. Now you're going to have to kind of work quick. Make sure you do not use washable Elmer's glue because you do not want moisture messing with your creation. So I'm going to spread this down so that it is even. And to get the clumps out, because we don't want the clumps of glue under our fabric, because it'll just seep through. And then once you get it evenly spread, you're going to pull your fabric down and just gently spread it out. Now be careful. If you do saturate it too hard, you're going to end up pulling your fabric, and you'll get stretch in your fabric. So you don't want to do that. Like I said, you want to do your glue very lightly. So I'm going to pull back this side, and I'm going to do the same thing again. Once again, I'm going to make sure that I'm spreading the glue out evenly and as thin as possible, because you don't want to saturate this down. And then I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm going to pull my fabric piece down, and I'm just going to smooth it out. Now, you will have to let this dry before you cut it. So while you're waiting for that to dry, you will need one additional hat piece, and this is to create stability. So you will take your template and trace it out onto another piece of cardboard. Now, I've already cut and traced the pieces out, so y'all didn't have to watch me do that. But when I cut and traced them out, because this is a printed material, and I wanted my lines and everything to be in the same direction, what I did was I laid my templates on top of my pattern and traced on the top. And then I cut it out. So after that, I took my additional hat piece, the poster board, and I glued it to the back of my hat. And this is going to give you the stability that you need for your hat. In addition to my two, this is my top piece, this is your brim, you're going to need a bottom piece to the brim. I chose to use black as my bottom piece because this is the piece that we're going to put wire in. So for this, you'll need your hot glue gun. Now for this, I chose, this is an 18 gauge wire. You can get this at Walmart. This comes in 110 foot. So when you get one, you have plenty to do several projects. And it's actually really easy to work with and bend. But I'm going to cut a more manageable section for me to work with. So you don't want to put this wire directly on the outside of the brim. And you can skip this part if you want to. I just want to be able to bend my brim. So that's why I chose to do this. If you don't, care if you want to bend your brim, you don't have to do this. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try and go ahead and mold my piece of wire into the shape that I want, and I'm going to place it about a ½ inch in on my brim. And then I'm going to cut the excess wire out. And then I'm going to size it up again. And I'm ready to hot glue. So it's pretty easy. So I'm going to start by putting my hot glue down. And I'm doing this on low temp. Kind of going to end up getting your finger in it just a little bit. But the good thing is, because it's on low temp, it's not that hot. Now what I'm going to do, because I don't want that point sticking out, I'm going to put a little bit of more hot glue. Not much, but I just want to make sure I cover the wire point up, because we don't want that sticking out later on. Then I'm going to put both the points together, and I'm going to put my hot glue right over the top. And I'm going to wait a second for it to cool down. If you don't wait for it to cool down, your wire will pop up, and you don't want your wire popping up because you don't want it poking through your hat later on. And I'm going to blow on this to encourage it to cool down so we can move on. Now that that's cooled down, I'm going to completely go around the top of my wire with some hot glue. Now, for this part, you do not have to wait for it to cool down. We can go ahead and attach our bottom piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that this is going to line up. And if it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. Be a little bit more careful than I just was. I accidentally drug it through my hot glue, so now I'm going to have to redo it, but that's okay. Not the end of the world. So what I'm going to do now, toward the outer edge, is I'm going to put another bead of hot glue down. I don't want to go too close to the edge because I don't want the glue seeping out, but I want to go close enough to seal it. And I'm just going to shoot some right there in the middle. So even if this doesn't match up perfectly, I will show you how to take care of that. We're going to hold that down, and I'm going to push around the edge. And make sure my edge is sealed. And I'm just going to keep doing that till I know that it's cooled down. So it's a little bit uneven, and really that's not a big issue, because all we're going to do is I'm going to take my scissors and just trim around where it's uneven. And there you have your hat brim. So now that we have all our pieces prepared and ready to go, we're ready to make our hat. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our hat piece and we are going to fold it over. And you want to make sure that your top and your bottom is flush. And sometimes it takes a little bit of maneuvering to get it there. And then once you do, you want to take just a little bit of hot glue and then hold that there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to double check, because this is the top, and make sure that this is going to fit properly and that I don't need to overlap more. And we don't, we're good to go. So now I'm going to finish putting my bead glue all the way down. And like I said, I'm being really careful. I want the glue to come up to the edge, but I really don't want it to seep out. But if it does, no big deal. We'll just do a little glue cleanup. And we're just going to hold that till it cools. So now that it's cooled, we're ready to put our top piece on, our hat. So I'm going to start at the back of the brim, and I'm going to kind of look at my top, and we're just going to start with a little hot glue right here. Once again, be careful, don't put too much hot glue, because if you overdo it, it's just, you know, hot glue you're going to have to clean up. And it just really doesn't take that much to glue the foam down and keep it in place. So now I'm going to hold that up and start going around my edge. And I would recommend just doing a little bit at a time. Don't worry about going too far. And placing your hat to the edge. If you can't get this perfect, don't worry, because we're going to put a little bit extra touches on it that cover that imperfection up anyway. So don't stress about it. So you can use whatever kind of fabric that you want. I would recommend something along the lines, flannel works great, 100% cotton. You know, I just would make sure that you didn't use a fabric that was like really see-through. Because even though you use the white foam, if you use a see-through fabric, the white can change the color of your fabric. So I notice my brim is a little bit big, which can happen by accident. So I'm going to try. I may not succeed. Oh well. We'll just fix this another way. Not a big deal. We'll just start coming this way so it'll line back up. Now, if you're not confident in this, believe it or not, just pull this a little bit smaller and then just go around and trim the excess off if that's what you want to do. Really not that big of a deal. You can just make your cone just a slight bit smaller and then just go around and trim the excess off. That way you don't have to worry about it fitting up perfectly like I'm doing right now. Just pull this together just a little bit smaller, and then you can just go around and take your scissors and trim the excess off. And if you do that too, make your cone a little bit smaller. It won't take near the time to glue it on like I'm doing right now. So like I said, the reason we used the cardboard in the hat part was to give it stability. Okay, so now that we have our brim on and we're ready to go, or our top on, we are ready to put our bottom on. So this takes just a little bit of eyeballing to it to make sure that it is centered in the middle. One thing I do recommend, especially when you are working with a pattern fabric, I'm going to make sure, because it is a pattern, that some of my squares, if they're going to line up, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to line these squares up. if that's possible, just to create a more pleasing look. If it's not possible, well, then it's not. It's not really a big deal. But it just so happens, and it also gives me a place to aim, and that was what other important, you know, it gives me a better aim as to where I'm going to set this when I put it down, if I'm able to center them, and I am. So now I'm going to go around here, and I'm going to put glue, hot glue, all the way around my brim. Now, if your glue seeps out, don't stress about it. Because we're going to put something down to cover that up. So now I'm going to hold that there. Give it just a few minutes to cool off. And now you have your hat. So now you're ready to put on your embellishments that are going to cover that up. What I'm going to choose to do to cover this up, because I just want it to be a nice black, I don't want to add any more color to this, is I'm going to choose to use foam pieces to do that. So I'm going to bring my foam out. You can use ribbon if you want to, cording. There's all kinds of things that you can use to cover these up. Like I said, I just want to use some plain black. And this is cheaper than buying ribbon, so that's why I just want to use the foam. So I'm going to cut a 1/2 inch piece at first. And then I have found it's easier, because I really only want a 1/4 inch. I found it's easier with my ruler to cut that 1/2 inch and then aim my line up to cut the 1/4 inch. Make sure when you're doing this that you hold your ruler down firmly, because otherwise the foam kind of slides. So now that we have our 1/4 inch pieces, I'm going to take the first one and I'm going to go around the brim. I'm going to find the back. Always make sure you start in the back with your lines and stuff, your seams. And I'm going to start in the back with that. So once again, I'm going to take a little bit of hot glue. And what I'm wanting to do is kind of make this flush with the top of my hat and just a little bit over. You want to go just a slight bit over the top. And then you're just going to keep going around. To cover that seam. Now this is actually a little bit easier to do with cording, because you don't have to worry about having such a straight line with cording. But instead of running out and buying cording, I just wanted to use what I had here. If you have a hard time controlling the amount of glue that comes out of your glue gun, you might want to get a mini gun with a small tip on it, because that will help. So now that we're all the way around, I'm going to show you a little trick. Just in case you got a little bit too liberal with your glue, I'm going to show you how to clean that up. So it's not a big deal. What you want to do is you want to take your hot glue gun and you just want to heat it up again to be able to pull it off. So just run your tip along your oopsie spots and then you'll just be able to pull it right off. I don't think you can see my oopsie spots that well in this camera angle, but you'll kind of get the point. Also, if there's a spot where it didn't stick very well, you don't like the way it looks, once again, just take your hot glue gun, take the tip, you're not shooting any glue, you're just warming your glue back up. So that you can fix it. It's not a big deal. So now that we've gone around the top brim, now I want to go around the bottom front edge. So the first thing I noticed is that there's a little place where we didn't get glued in, so we're just going to fix that really quick. Not a big deal. And then I'm going to go around and check the rest of my edge and make sure it's good and sealed. And it is. So once again, I'm going to come around to the back. Now this, I'm going to try and kind of center it. And then we're just going to go around the brim of the hat. Once again, as you're doing this, be really careful that you don't overuse your hot glue so it's not seeping out. It's kind of a tedious operation because it's a little bit difficult, yes, to control the amount of hot glue coming out. There is also, if you kind of don't have the patience for this, with the hot glue to do this, you can get a self-adhesive foam, and then you cut it and you just take the backing off of it and you can stick it right to it without having to go through the hot glue process. So that's an alternative if you're just not able to get the hot glue to gently flow out. Just get the foam in a self-adhesive form. And it has a backing on it just like you would use like the 3M tape or a sticker. And it comes in a sheet just like this does. So you can cut it to any size that you want. Alright, so I got a little glue boo-boo, so I'm just going to run down here, heat it up a little bit, clean it up. Like I said, all you have to do is take your glue gun, heat it up, and it'll clean right up. So even if you do overdo, excuse me, you can come back and fix it. So it's not a big deal. Like I said, I'm just using the tip of my gun to heat it back up and get those little overages out. Just like that. So the one last thing that we're going to do is we're going to put a little edge around this brim, around the center, the top of the brim. And I want it to be a little bit wider, so I am going to cut this a 1/2 inch. The longest part of this project when you initially first start doing it is going to be the cutting of the templates. After you get your templates cut, you'll be able to make these pretty fast. So I'm going to put a little hot glue on mine. And I'm going to start my seam over here. Now the good thing about this is we don't necessarily have to hot glue all the way around. As you go, all you have to do is hold it down, make sure it's down to the brim, and then when you get to the back, once again, just double check, and then you can hot glue this down back here. So you don't have to do the hot glue around just to 2 places. And then once that sets, just fold this back and cut it off. And there you have your little snowman top hat. Once you get done and we get ready to put it on the snowman, that's when we will sculpt the little head, the hat, to fit on the snowman and to go on our project. So come on back once you get your hat done, and now we're ready to make our snowman. Hello everybody, welcome back. So now this part's going to go pretty quick. We're going to make the snowman. To cut this out, what I recommend that you do, don't cut this out first, is I recommend that you take this and you glue this down to your poster board first and then cut out your templates. Because they're so intricate, they're kind of hard to trace out. So I would just glue this down and then cut your templates out. So once you cut your templates out, you're ready to go. Now I've already cut the mouthpiece out so you didn't have to watch me trace it. But what I did to make it easier was I modified how I do the eyes a little bit. So we're going to start there. So believe it or not, I traced this on with an ink pen, and I can't see it, but you'll be able to if you just use an ink pen to trace this on with. So I'm going to cut my eyes out. And then I traced it onto white also, and we're going to cut those out. So the reason I modified this is because, you know, realistically, it's kind of hard to cut out little white dots. Make sure when you're cutting your white out that you go to the inside of your line, because you do want the white to be smaller than the black. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of pair these up. And I'm going to notice that my white is still a little bit bigger than what I want. So I'm actually going to take the 2 of these and I'm just going to put them together. And I'm just going to trim them down a little bit more. And I'm going to trim down till they're just smaller than my black pieces. Now that they are, I'm going to pair them back up again. And now this is where I modified how I do the eyes, and I'm just going to kind of come in here and I'm going to go and make a half circle. For my eyes. That way I'm not having to cut out little bitty white dots. So I'm just going to glue these on now. And then there's our eyes. So what we want to do for the nose, I've got some leftover orange here. And I'm going to kind of make a square with it. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball it and cut it. And then I'm going to come down to the edge and we're going to kind of roll that way to make the nose. So we don't need all of that because we don't want it to be like a horrible looking edge. So I'm going to cut some of this off now. And then I'm going to roll it one more time. And what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to put a little hot glue here to hold my start. So that I get a nice point on my nose. And then I'm going to put a bead of hot glue down the edge and hold it. So the point wasn't as nice as what I want. No worries. We're just going to cut that, make it flush. And then down here, we're going to cut it straight across because that's going to be the part that we glue onto our snowman. And then you'll be able to bend this a little bit to give it a little bit of personality and character. And then that's your nose. So we have our eyes and our nose ready. And our mouth to go on our snowman. So now we need to get our foam ball, our styrofoam ball ready. Now if you don't have a foam cutter, this is a 6-inch ball. If you don't have a foam cutter, you can just use a serrated knife. But foam cutters aren't expensive, so I would recommend getting one for future use because it just makes it easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut a flat spot where our hat is going to sit. So I'm just going to take my foam cutter and it'll go down nicely and cut right down through real quick. And the nice thing about it is I'm not having to saw back and forth. To get the cut I want, and it's nice and clean and sealed. So I would definitely recommend getting a foam cutter because it's pretty convenient. And then you don't have the foam shaving mess either. So this is where we're going to put our hat. That way it's got a nice flush mount set to it. If you felt like you made it too big, don't worry, because we're going to cut another side off. Because this is going to be our neck. You still want a nice round, so be careful that you don't lose the nice roundness. But we want a little bit of flat spot, and that's to put our quilt batting on. Alright, so now that we've cut our styrofoam, we are ready to go. And I'm going to use the smaller side for my hat. And if you use one of these, yes, it does smoke a little bit. I'm going to make sure I turn mine off now. Alright, so now I'm going to use quilt batting. So the quilt batting we're going to kind of use as snow to cover up our styrofoam. You can get this at Walmart, different places, Hobby Lobby. So the cut doesn't have to be perfect for your batting. But what you're going to do basically is you're going to roll this up, and it'll stick nicely to the foam. But just to make sure, because I don't want to chase it all over the place, I'm going to put just a little bead of glue down. Not much at all required. And then I'm going to roll this up, and I think I'm going to do it and then just cut it off. Now, if you have a green styrofoam ball, you'll have to use a little bit more. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to glue our seam down. Now, if you have a little bit too much on the top, you might have to cut this off because you don't want it to be bulky. So this is a little bit too much on top of mine, so I'm going to cut some of it off. And then this seam right here is going to be a little bit too much bulk. I want my hat to sit right, so I'm going to cut this off. Now this part doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be covered up. So you can just wrap it however you need to. Alright, so now that I know it's going to fit, I'm going to go on the inside and I'm going to lay a bead of glue all the way around. And then I'm just going to press this in. So I'm going to cut this excess off. Like I said, we don't want this too bulky. So there's just a little bit of excess. And I'm going to glue down these loose pieces now. And then we'll go to the other side and do the same thing all over again. So that's a little bit too bulky. So we're just going to cut some of the excess off. And then I'm going to cut this overlap piece off. And I'm doing the overlap piece that's on the inside, not the outside one. So now I'm just going to go around and lay a bead of glue down. And push the batting in. Notice I'm pulling on a little bit. I want to make sure that it's nice and smooth. So I have a nice snowman face. And once again, I'm going to just go and cut the bulky excess off. All right, now that we have our styrofoam ball covered, the next thing I want to do is I want to make the neck piece. So I have some left over from when we cut that out. So I saved that just for this. So let me get my hot stuff out of the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut along here, and I'm going to cut about 1.5 inches. I found that 1.5 inches is basically like big enough to look nice for this. And I'm going to pay attention to my fabric, and I'm going to cut a clean edge here first along the edge of my fabric. And then I'll cut that. And that's about 1.5 inches. So what we're going to do here is we're going to overlap this. Just a little bit to glue it together. But first, before we do that, we're going to make sure that it's going to have a nice fit. And it's a little bit too small. So we're going to modify that. So using the leftover didn't work, but that's okay. Not a big deal. What we're going to do is we are just going to get a fresh piece of foam here. And we'll cut that 1.5 inches again. Just like that. And then this is the next piece that we want to make sure that it's stable. So we're going to use our poster board again. And I'm going to grab that and I'm going to cut an 1.5 inch piece for this also. Okay, so now what we want to do, now there's a slick side of the cardboard and then there is a kind of roughed up side. You want to make sure that you glue down your roughed up side to your piece of foam. And it's not going to take much glue. We're just using this to stabilize our neck piece. So I'm just going to, but be careful, you just, like I said, you don't want to use much glue at all. Because otherwise it takes forever to dry. And you don't want it to take forever to dry. So I'm going to kind of center that on there and then stick it down. And I'm going to cut the excess cardboard out. Just like that. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, because the leftover piece didn't work out, which is okay, I'm going to cut this, and I'm going to cut it about 3 inches so that I can cover that neck piece and have some overlap. So now we're going to cover this, and we can just do this with the hot glue gun. Make sure you don't get your salvage edge there. But I'm going to kind of be picky, and I'm going to pull this down just a little bit. And to start out, I'm going to fold this edge over. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. Now I'm going to cut the salvage edge off. Alright, now that we've done that, we just want to hot glue down and fold this over and cover. So I'm going to go all the way down, and start laying a bead of glue. And I'm going to fold that in. Come down the other side, I'm going to do the same thing again. I got hot glue all over the place, y'all. That's okay. So the reason we're making this stable is that way your snowman head will sit up. And not roll around. Alright. So now that we've done that, let's go back to putting our neck piece on. And now that we do have it big enough, this time, so if you want to know, that was about 18 inches long for the neck piece. Once this cools down, we will be ready to attach it to our snowman. So I'm going to take my snowman head and I'm going to set it in my circle, double check, make sure everything fits the way that I want it to fit, nice and snug. And since it does, I'm going to go around the inside edge fairly close to the top. You got to go fairly close to the top. And I'm going to put a bead of glue. Keep in mind, because you're on low temp, you want to try to do this as quickly as possible. And I'm going to set that back down, grab my snowman's head, and I'm going to snug him down in there, being very careful. And we're going to hold that there. Once it cools off, just to make sure that this isn't going to move, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to lay a little bit more hot glue around the edge. Just to make sure that it's going to stay on there and stay nice and snug. So now that we're doing that, I want to turn around to the back. And now we want to put our hat on, so we want to make sure all of our seams are in the back. So I'm going to turn my little dude facing front now. Make sure my hat looks good and it's facing a good direction. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a ton of glue on my hat. I'm not going to go all the way out to the outer edge because we want the brim to bend. So I don't want to go all the way out to the outer edge. So basically staying more toward the inside because, like I said, we're going to bend the brim down. And then we're going to hold that down. All right. So now we're going to make sure we have everything directly in the back. Look, isn't that cute? We're going to make sure we have everything directly in the back. So we're going to kind of lay him on his back to make sure he doesn't go anywhere. And then we're going to decide where we want our eyes. First and foremost, I kind of need him to look at me. But I think we'll bend the brim down a little bit first. Let's get our brim bent a little bit because that kind of adds to the cuteness and where we're going to set our eyes. So you're just going to take your wire and just bend it down a little bit and do the same thing in the back. It just kind of gives it a more nicer look to bend it down. So now that we did that, let's get our eyes and decide where we want to set them. Of course, we don't want to set them too far apart or anything that they'll look goofy. And I kind of like to tilt mine in just at an angle a little bit. So I think that's where I want mine. Right about there. So I kind of like mine to tilt in just a little bit. Now you can actually buy eyes like this. I found some. So if you plan on making a lot of these, you can just buy the eyes instead of having to cut out the templates and things like that. So now we got his eyes on. His mouth actually sits that way. So now we want to put his nose on. Want to make sure when you glue the nose on that the seam is facing down. So kind of put the nose up. Decide where you want it. Put some hot glue in it. Like I said, just make sure the seam is facing down. And then the last piece is his mouth. Isn't he a happy little guy? Alright, so what I decided to do with this one instead of doing a scarf is I decided to make him a little bow tie. And the reason I decided to make a little bow tie instead of a scarf was to cut down on the monotony of all the plaid. And I lost my piece of pre-cut. Nope, no I did. Here it is. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to make our own bow tie. Pretty simple to do. We're going to take some foam. And I don't know if you remember making fans when you were in school, but that's basically what we're going to do. I'm going to fold it over about 1/2 inch. This piece was cut 3 inches, 6 inches. So it's 3 inches this way, 6 inches this way. And we're just going to start folding it over back and forth like an accordion. Kind of like you made a fan when you were in school. Just like that. But what we're going to do to hold it in place is we're going to take the little center places and we're going to dab a little hot glue in each little center place so it won't move to hold in place. We're going to do that on both sides. So that it won't move. So now we have that. I'm going to fold this over and we're going to make the center to our bow tie. This piece is about 2.5 inches by 2 inches. So the 2.5 inches this way, 2.5. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this over just like that. Because I kind of want a little bit of thickness to this and I don't want like a sharp cut edge. And I'm going to press that down really good to kind of put my fold indentions in. And then I'm going to lay some hot glue down to hold my folds in place. Just like that. So now we want to take our tie, and this is going to be the center for our tie, and we're just going to loop this around our tie, make the center for our tie, and we'll glue that down in the back. I'm beginning to wonder if I should have cut my fingernails. All right, so now that we got our bow tie made, we're ready to put it on. So we're just going to put some hot glue on the back of it. We're going to hold it there till it cools. I put quite a bit of hot glue on it because it's kind of standing out there on their own, so if it snags and stuff, I really don't want it to come off. And there you have it. You have your jolly, happy little snowman. I hope y'all really enjoyed this, and I hope you have fun making these. I really, really, really can't wait to see the ones that y'all make. Y'all have fun. Don't forget to show me the ones that you make, and I will see y'all later on. Bye, y'all.